Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So ever since we had that bridge collapse in Pittsburgh, a lot of talk about infrastructure, a lot of talk about the state's failure to invest in infrastructure, something I've been talking about for, all 17 years of me doing this. The fact that we've needing to invest in better roads, bridges, in our infrastructure, better airports, waterways, all of that stuff. In fact, the American Society of Civil Engineers keeps reminding us we're failing. We're failing on so many levels. And even the $1.2 trillion, the historic $1.2 trillion, is only a third of what we actually needed. Let me check the watch again. 2 years ago. So we got a lot to do. But here's the thing. We're going to get that bridge in Pittsburgh fixed. My hope is at some point, and I know this is just me hoping and wishing, I hope we fix things before they collapse. Because can you imagine being on a city bus that goes 150 feet down into a ravine and having to have a human chain of people to get you out? Yeah, me neither, which is why I'd prefer not to do it. I'm here to share some thoughts on infrastructure, the need for better and more infrastructure. I've asked our good friend Austin Kaiser to come talk with us. Austin is the assistant to the president of government affairs at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the IBEW. Austin, thanks for taking time for us.
I appreciate it, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So are we on the same page? We would like to have infrastructure that we repair before it collapses. Maybe just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It doesn't just need repaired. A lot of it needs just upgraded so that it can be efficient and useful in the society we live in today instead of what it was 70 years ago. So, we think transmission lines and electrical infrastructure, a lot of it's still functioning at the level that it needed to function at a long, long time ago, but without significant upgrades. And we're not going to be able to support the new industries of the future. We're not going to be able to support electric vehicle infrastructure. So tons of build out need to happen, tons of upgrades need to happen. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we've watched our infrastructure basically disintegrate before our eyes, like a third world country in many places. And I look at my coastal areas and other areas that are affected by extreme weather events that are sort of the worst effects of climate change. We have to do things like raise infrastructure out of the floodplains. Yep. And so these are massive investments, and there are a lot of jobs here too, right? So they can drive the economy at the same time. And we just seem to be, people like to bury their head in the sand and pretend like we don't have to deal with it.
Now, before we go any further, I want to throw a quick shout out to your members because the Northeast just got slammed with a big bomb storm or whatever they were calling it. And your members were out there keeping the power on. And I want people to remember that it's the IBEW members who are out there stringing those lines and fixing things in the worst possible weather to make sure that you don't freeze in your homes. So quick shout out to you guys and the folks who actually did that, because I know I got friends who live up that way. It was brutal.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, people forget they're the first of the first responders. There's a major event. They got to go in and get electricity back on. They've got to get critical infrastructure like hospitals and nursing homes and other things up and running, pumps, all sorts of things to keep cities from flooding. They're usually the first ones in, even before the National Guard and local law enforcement will go in and rescue sometimes, especially in flood areas. They need to make sure the water's not energized. So first guys in, and they live down there in their trucks for weeks and are up and, like you talked about New England and major winter events. They're sleeping in their trucks if they're sleeping at all, working around the clock to get things back up and running.
And this is where I come back to Austin, going, the infrastructure bill was great. $1.2 trillion is a good start. And I know a lot of people, this is the end of the road. No, to me, this is a start. Because as I said, the American Society of Civil Engineers said 2 years ago that we needed 3 times this amount just to get to even. Not to get to the point to where my grandparents' generation fought for, which was at the edge of technology and getting to the extent of possible. We're just saying we just want to be even. So we're not looking at getting A's anymore. We're looking at B minus. We're okay with that. For me, I think we want to go further. And on the electrical part of this, we shouldn't have your guys having to live in trucks in horrible weather. We should be investing the kind of infrastructure that we need, because these storms are coming. And in places like Texas, things are going to get worse. And with climate change coming on, it's going to get even worse. So we need to be redoing all of this stuff, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do a whole show like on Puerto Rico or the coasts in Florida and what's happening there. But yeah, no, we have to invest in a real way. But we also have to think about we're talking about transmission lines and some of that infrastructure, but our power plants and our energy generation is a major issue here too. And you talk about the money. It's not enough to completely upgrade everything. It's a big chunk. I think it's as far as Biden can get folks to go right now. We're hoping to double down on a little bit with the Build Back Better agenda, but we're in a little bit of a deadlock there.
But in talking about moving forward and doing this stuff, and I've been talking about the electric vehicles and I've been talking about all of the changes that are happening in the auto industry and in other industries where we have to have this just transition. You look at these power plants that we're closing, the coal fire ones, these that are in communities that were mainstay job creators that brought power in. We've got to figure out how, while moving away from the past stuff, to make sure that people have a just transition, that they don't their lives don't become worse, that things aren't dumped at their doorstep as we've done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, look, it all ties together, right? This whole economy is pretty intertwined, and energy is actually the largest part of the economy, and it's a big deal. So if you take these communities, and I'm going to give just a very direct example. So I come from a town called Portsmouth, Ohio, in a county called Scioto County, Ohio. It's in southeast Ohio. It's tucked in the hills, beautiful country down there.
I know where it is.
The entire economy is driven by coal-fired power plants, coal country, right? Even though there's not many coal mines left in that area, still all the plants were coal-fired. It was the biggest train yard, Norfolk and Southern Yard, between New York and Chicago. When I was a kid, right? Barge traffic, we call it coal barges. It's barge traffic though, up and down the Ohio River, moving. And we had a major steel mill that was mostly coal-fired, coal-blasted coking facilities where they treat the coal and using the blast furnaces. And all of those are gone now, right? All of them are gone, and we get it, right? Benzene was a major polluter. There's all sorts of things that were happening. AEP and others made decisions to offload coal out of their assets because of power purchase agreements, arrangements, the Ohio Clean Air Authority, all sorts of complex, matrix of public policy. But what nobody thought about it was what they were going to do to the communities when they shut these jobs down. They thought environment only, and what we have to realize is that two things can be true at the same time. Correct. The environment needs cleaned up, and good jobs have to exist. And because abject poverty kills as many, if not more people than the pollution does, right? Now, the pollution's, a little harder, it's hard to reverse, but so is poverty, especially when we get into generational poverty. So now we took a community that was all union jobs. These guys are making, very, very good money. They're driving the economy. The town was booming. When I was a kid, it was solid middle class. Now it's absolutely decimated. It looks like a third world country, right? And you talk about infrastructure. The people who are left behind without jobs can't afford to maintain the infrastructure they have. They can't maintain the mileage of sewer lines underneath their streets. The tax base just isn't there anymore. And their bonded indebtedness is so high that they can't borrow money anymore, right? So without this infusion coming from the infrastructure plan, they can't even do the basic necessities of fixing a busted sewer line under their streets on many occasions. And sometimes it takes them weeks to get done what they used to do in a night. And it's just totally decimated. But now the biggest job creators, the biggest employers are in that community now?
I would assume Walmart.
No, it's a hospital that's growing in a town that's shrinking because the opioid epidemic, just all the ills of poverty, just drive at that community, and it cause all sorts of social ills. So you have the hospital, you have the drug rehabilitation clinic that was a very small little nonprofit when I was there. I actually served on the board on it for a while. Now is the second largest employer in that community. They're buying up old factories to put beds in them for inpatient treatment centers. And the third is the state prison. They weren't even close to the top employers when I was a kid. And so we have to recognize that if we destroy communities, what we leave behind is things that are going to collapse. I mean, you can't have sewage systems rotting under streets either, right? So, it's one thing to come in heavy, say it's polluting, shut it down. But without alternatives and without other ways to drive the economy, you're leaving behind just absolute devastation. And that's what we wrestle with every day because we're not climate deniers at all, right? I mean, you just heard me talking about the worst effects of climate change. Right. We totally recognize it. But what we don't always agree on is how we practically fix it. because it's also true when you start offline a bunch of baseload coal-fired power plants. I love solar and wind. Like we're happy to build solar and wind, right? We've been training in it for decades. But it's still a fact that only 5% of the bulk power in this country is solar power. And it's going to take a long, long time to scale up and also to figure out how it works in a place where you have a major snowstorm in like Boston, to where you get snow piled up on solar panels and you can't even get in there to clear them off and start generating electricity again. It's hard enough just to keep the power lines healthy enough to deliver the electricity without having to worry about the generation sources. So, there's some real economic, but also practical problems with how we generate power and deliver it. And so we have to switch to things that are true baseload power to complement it. Without things like nuclear power, solar and wind will never reach their full potential. It's impossible to do. They're intermittent power sources. They're good power sources when they're working well, but they're intermittent. They also need something like nuclear, coal, natural gas cleaned up, right? And then, I understand, the argument between there's no such thing as clean coal, right? But there's carbon capture technologies now that can pretty much take it down to no emissions. And I'm not saying all coal plants. I don't think you'll see another major coal plant built in the United States ever.
Probably not. No, you're right. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Austin Kaiser. Austin's the assistant to the president for government affairs at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW. You want to check out their website, IBEW.org. In talking about this, and I'm 100% with you, because I witnessed, and I think as a country, we witnessed all of the ill effects of something going away. We all lived through deindustrialization of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I remember those steel mill jobs, those auto worker jobs, those jobs that were the bedrock of a middle class just evaporate. And with it came all of the negatives that you're talking about: alcoholism, drug use, domestic violence, high crime, all high suicide rates, all of this stuff. And learning from those examples as we move forward, I think, is an absolute must, which is why I liked Jay Inslee. I liked his just transition plan with his Green New Deal kind of program, because it talked about just this. It talked about, as we shut down one industry, we move those workers into that next industry and give them good union jobs with good union wages, so they don't lose their standard of living.
Yeah, I would look. I like Jay Inslee a lot, and I think that's a well-intentioned plan, right? And in a macro, it's good because you have to create new jobs. But what we have to think more about is the micro, right? So I like the Biden, Jennifer Granholm discussion a lot better about how we do place-based strategies, right? Where we look at the brownfields in the United States, and that's where we incentivize development, right? So because creating 10,000 jobs in California doesn't replace the 800 that were lost in the Ohio River Valley last year, right? It's not that easy, especially now because you need two incomes to feed a family. So, if I lose my job and my wife is still a school teacher or she's a nurse in the local community, now I have a tough decision. Do we uproot and move and chase jobs? It used to be an easy decision back in the day, right? The coal plant shut down. Dad worked. They packed up the bags and they headed to Detroit and got a job in the auto plant, right? And they started their family, they moved their family, and it's just not that easy anymore. So that's a hard part. So what we like is a different concept, and what we put forward, I wouldn't say it's completely different. I think it dovetails well with what Inslee was talking about and how we can put these things together. But what we like is a worker retention program, right? What it essentially does is it replaces the wages of these workers for a certain period of time and incentivizes the energy companies to keep these folks on payroll. They're union members. They have pensions. They have health care. So it's not just their wages that we're talking about here, right? So some of them are old enough that we can transition over into a full retirement of what they would have got 5 years from now. Some of them are younger folks, middle of their career folks that need to figure out what they're going to do. So keeping them on their payroll for about 5 years while they either transition inside the company and move into another sector. And it's even a complicated issue because the matrix of state regulations. Some power companies who do generation aren't allowed to own their transmission lines, right? So there might be a growth in transmission, a need for power linemen, but that's not the same employer. But how do we take that time to train them, but keep them on pay, where they can continue to drive their local economy and their economy doesn't fall apart in the process of the transition?
No, this is right in line with what I talk about with automation. There should be, a technology tax. There should be something that ensures that those people who are losing their jobs to automation, especially when you're talking about the truck driver jobs of the future that are going to go away. A lot of guys are in their 50s. You're not going to retrain them to be, computer programmers. That's not going to happen. But they shouldn't lose their standard of living. So there should be something in place to look, I'm not saying punish these companies, but make them responsible for what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ways to do it, right? I mean, there's tax money that can go in here too, right? I mean, we ought to be looking at it compounds really quickly. So the biggest job compounder in any community are the energy jobs, the power plant worker job, right? In a nuke plant, for instance, there are 10 jobs relying upon that one job in that community. That's the biggest multiplier of any measured industry. And they're also the highest wage and hour jobs that exist in our community. So I'm not talking about nuke, but coal's not far behind that, and natural gas isn't far behind that. And so if we just say it's about the worker and that worker deserves his pay, that's really not the whole story, right? Because it goes really quick from him or her to their family, to their community, to the other jobs, to their family, to their community. I watched Portsmouth, Ohio come apart at the seams over a matter of 6 or 7 years. It was just absolutely you couldn't find a parking spot downtown when I was a kid to the day I graduated from high school. There was barely a business open in downtown. And that was all because of those job losses.
Yeah,
and so we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to be sensitive to that, and the place-based strategies are the solution. How do we take those new jobs and put them exactly where those industries were lost, not just sort of a macro vision of creating jobs over here means that this community somehow is made whole.
It's an excellent point. It's an excellent point, and I'm sure as the weeks and months come along, we're going to have you back to talk about this because this isn't going to go away. And I'm all in favor. I'm all in favor of making the workers whole. That should be our first starting point. Yeah, we want to address climate change. We want to address all of those other things. But at first, you got to make sure that the workers are whole and that they're taken care of. But Austin, I appreciate the time and the work that you guys do. I know you'll come back and share some more with us down the road.
Anytime, brother. Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Austin Kaiser. Make sure you check out the website. IBEW.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do just that. If you missed any of the interview, if you're just tuning in, grab the podcast. I'll take the program on the go wherever you go. TheRickSmithShow.com is where you get it. Share it with your friends. Spread it around. All the good news right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.